I was watching my son poison me on a hidden camera when I realized some betrayals run deeper than death itself. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in October. David was in my kitchen, carefully switching pills in my medication organizer while I was supposed to be at a cardiologist appointment. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the laptop. For 58 years, I built what I thought was an unshakable life, a commercial real estate empire that started with a single duplex renovation in Tacoma and grew into Bennett Development Group, managing over $40 million in properties across the Pacific Northwest. 22 years married to Patricia, my second wife, though the divorce papers she'd filed 3 months ago made it clear those years meant less to her than the 50% she was demanding. 2 children from 2 marriages. Sarah, my 35-year-old daughter from my first marriage to Claire, who died of cancer when Sarah was 12, and David, my 32-year-old son with Patricia, who I was watching commit murder in slow motion. My name is Michael Bennett, and this is the story of how I discovered my son was trying to kill me, my wife was letting it happen, and how I made damn sure they both paid for it. The nightmare began 6 months earlier, with chest pains that wouldn't quit. Dr. Lisa Kim, a cardiologist at Swedish Medical Center in Seattle, diagnosed me with a serious arrhythmia requiring careful medication management. Nothing immediately fatal, she assured me, but I needed to take blood thinners and beta blockers on a precise schedule. Miss a dose or take the wrong combination, and I could stroke out, or my heart could simply stop. At 58, I wasn't ready to slow down. Bennett Development was in the middle of 3 major projects, but I understood the stakes, so I followed doctor's orders to the letter. David was the first to visit after my diagnosis. He showed up at our house in Laurelhurst with Rachel, his wife of 4 years, both wearing expressions of concern that I found touching at the time. "Dad, we need to talk about contingency planning," David said, settling into the leather chair in my study. He'd always liked that chair, even as a kid. "Have you updated your estate documents recently?" "Everything's current, son. Updated 2 years ago. You and Sarah are both taken care of." "But what about power of attorney?" Rachel interjected, her eyes scanning the bookshelves lined with deal trophies and family photos. "If something happens suddenly, someone needs to be able to make medical and financial decisions." I should have noticed the way she inventoried the room. I should have paid attention to the urgency in David's voice, but I was focused on the stabbing pain in my chest and the fog from the new medications. "Patricia and I will discuss it," I said. "You should discuss it soon," David pressed. "I mean, with the divorce proceedings and everything, you need clarity on who makes decisions if you're incapacitated." He had a point. Patricia and I were barely speaking by then, communicating mostly through lawyers about asset division. Our 22-year marriage had imploded over the past year. The truth is, we'd been dying slowly for years. After David graduated college and moved out, we realized we had nothing in common except parenting. She wanted to travel, join nonprofit boards, live the socialite life she'd imagined. I wanted to build, expand, acquire more properties. She felt neglected. I felt pressured to be something I wasn't. We became polite strangers sharing a house, staying together out of inertia and the fear of starting over. When she finally filed for divorce, demanding $8.5 million, half of what she claimed were our marital assets, it felt almost inevitable. But I never imagined that resentment could curdle into something so cold that she'd watch her stepson kill me and calculate whether my death served her better than my survival. Sarah stopped by the next evening. She lived in a modest apartment in Fremont, making a living as a freelance graphic designer. We'd always been close, especially after Claire died. Sarah inherited her mother's careful nature and her talent for reading people. "How are you really doing, Dad?" she asked, helping me organize paperwork in the study. "Tired. These medications make everything foggy." She picked up one of my pill bottles, frowning at the label. "This seems complicated. Are you tracking everything properly? David actually set up a weekly organizer for me, made it easier to keep track. Something flickered across her face. David did that? When? A few weeks ago. Why? Nothing. It's just, Dad, have you noticed David's been acting strange lately? Rachel mentioned they're having serious money problems. Your brother's doing fine. He works in tech marketing, makes good money. Does he? Sarah's voice was careful. Because Rachel told me they're drowning in debt. Something about a failed crypto investment and gambling debts. I waved her off. Your brother is just concerned about his old man. But after she left, her words stuck with me. Over the following weeks, I started noticing things. My computer password had been changed. Files in my study had been moved. Bank statements I normally received were suddenly missing. And I was feeling worse. Not better, despite taking my medication faithfully. The symptoms came in waves that grew stronger each week. Dizziness so severe I'd grip the bathroom counter when I stood, waiting for the room to stop spinning. Nausea that made food repulsive. I lost 12 pounds in a month. My hands developed a persistent tremor that made signing documents difficult. I'd wake at 3 a.m. with my heart hammering, racing at 140 beats per minute, then suddenly dropping so low I'd wonder if it would simply stop. My vision blurred. Colors seemed washed out. I'd stare at financial reports, and the numbers would swim on the page. Dr. Kim kept adjusting my medications, increasingly concerned. Your echocardiogram shows worsening cardiac function, she'd say, frowning at the charts. But I don't understand why. You're young for this kind of rapid deterioration. We may need to consider more aggressive interventions. What kind of interventions? Potentially a pacemaker. Maybe even transplant evaluation if this continues. I was dying by degrees, and my own cardiologist couldn't understand why. Neither did I. Not until I saw that footage of David in my kitchen, carefully switching pills like he was following a recipe for murder. One evening, David came by when Patricia was out. She'd moved into the guest house on our property during the divorce proceedings, maintaining the appearance of civility while our lawyers battled. David seemed nervous, pacing in my study. Dad, about that Richmond property development, the one projected to be worth $3 million when it completes. Who's designated as successor if you can't manage it? I kept my eyes half closed in my reading chair. The board handles transitions. Why? Just thinking ahead. Have you considered maybe stepping back, focusing on your health? I could help manage things. I've got the MBA from Stanford. I understand the business. I'm not dead yet, son. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Of course not, Dad. I just want to help. After he left, I sat in the study for a long time. Sarah's warning echoed in my mind. The next morning, I made a decision that would save my life. I called a security company and had them install cameras throughout the house. Not the obvious kind. These were pinhole cameras hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, even the kitchen clock. AI-enabled motion detection with cloud backup. I told Patricia it was for general security during the divorce, which wasn't entirely a lie. You're being paranoid, Michael, she said from the doorway of the guest house. But whatever helps you feel safe. 3 days later, the cameras captured something that turned my blood cold. I was reviewing footage on my laptop, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing, when I saw David enter the kitchen at 2:47 p.m., a time when he knew I'd be at a doctor's appointment and Patricia would be at her Pilates class. He went straight to the cabinet where I kept my medication organizer. He pulled out a small plastic bag from his jacket pocket, removed pills from my compartments, and replaced them with identical-looking tablets. Then, he pocketed the originals. The whole thing took less than 90 seconds. I watched the footage 3 times, my hands shaking so badly the laptop vibrated on my thighs. The study smelled like old leather and the bourbon I'd poured, but couldn't drink. Outside, a car alarm went off. Someone's normal Tuesday crisis while I watched my son commit murder at 2:47 p.m. on a sunny October afternoon. My own son, my own blood, switching my medication. But with what? And why? I forced myself to keep watching the archived footage. Later that evening, with both Patricia and me home, David stood in our backyard, phone to his ear, thinking he had privacy. The camera audio picked up everything. "It's working," he said quietly. "He's getting weaker every day. The doctor thinks it's just his condition progressing." A woman's voice. "Rachel." "How much longer?" "Dr. Kim said maybe 4 to 6 weeks if his heart keeps deteriorating at this rate. I've got the power of attorney papers ready to sign. Once he's incapacitated or gone, I can start moving assets immediately." "What about Sarah?" "She gets half under the current will, but half of something is better than all of nothing. Once Dad's gone and we've secured what we can, it won't matter. She's not exactly business savvy." "And Patricia?" "She's playing her part. As long as she stays quiet and gets her divorce settlement, she won't interfere. She knows if he dies before the divorce finalizes, she inherits more under the old will anyway." I sat frozen in my chair, the laptop screen blurring through tears I didn't realize I was crying. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was killing me, methodically, with pills designed to accelerate my heart failure. And my wife of 22 years knew about it and was staying silent, calculating her own advantage. The betrayal was a double blade, cutting twice as deep. The next morning, I told Patricia I was going to my regular cardiologist appointment. Instead, I drove to a private medical clinic in Bellevue, somewhere David wouldn't think to check. I brought the pills from my organizer and explained my suspicions to a doctor I'd never met before, someone outside my usual medical network. Dr. Jennifer Walsh was a cardiologist in her 50s, with sharp eyes that turned harder as I explained the situation. She ran a comprehensive blood panel and had the pills analyzed. 2 days later, she called with results that confirmed my worst fears. "Mr. Bennett, your blood shows significantly elevated levels of digoxin. It's a heart medication, but you're not prescribed it. In the doses you've been receiving, it would cause progressive heart failure. The pills your son substituted contain digoxin instead of your beta blockers. If you'd continued taking them for another month, you would likely have died of what appeared to be natural cardiac arrest." I listened to her explain the mechanics of how my son was murdering me, and something inside me crystallized. The businessman who'd built an empire from nothing understood something more important than confrontation. I needed evidence, documentation, and a plan. "Dr. Walsh, I need you to document everything. Blood tests, pill analysis, timeline. I'll need you to testify." "Already done, Mr. Bennett. I've also reported this to the police as suspected attempted murder. They'll want to speak with you." That evening, I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop in Ballard, far from home and prying eyes. When she arrived, I could see from my expression that she knew something was catastrophically wrong. "Dad?" I showed her the security footage on my phone, showed her the medical report, told her everything, including Patricia's role in staying silent while David killed me. I watched my daughter's face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally, cold rage. "That bastard," she whispered. "What are we going to do?" "We're going to make sure he goes to prison, and we're going to make sure Patricia pays too. But I need your help, and I need you to act completely normal around both of them. Can you do that?" She wiped her eyes and nodded. "Tell me what you need." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah and I worked with my attorney, Robert Harrison, a veteran lawyer who'd handled my business deals for 15 years. We didn't just gather evidence. We built a 3-phase strategy that would crush David and Patricia on every front. Phase 1. Intelligence gathering. Robert hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator. Within a week, we discovered David had $175,000 in debts, $85,000 in gambling losses from an online poker addiction, $50,000 from a catastrophic crypto investment in something called Mooncoin that went to zero, $40,000 in maxed out credit cards. 2 years ago, David had begged me for $500,000 to start a tech consulting firm. I'd given it to him, believing in my son. The company failed within 18 months, burning through every dollar. When David came back asking for another $300,000, I'd refused. You need to earn it yourself, like I did, I'd told him. I'm not running a charity. I thought I was teaching him resilience. Instead, I'd created resentment that curdled into murder. The forensic accountant discovered something more damning. David had forged my signature on power of attorney documents 5 months ago, just 1 month after my diagnosis, and had been systematically transferring funds from Bennett Development's operating accounts to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts at first. $15,000 here, $20,000 there, disguised as vendor payments and consultant fees. Amounts small enough to slip past the monthly reviews but large enough to add up. Over 4 months, he'd moved $385,000. I'd been too sick and too distracted by the divorce to notice the irregularities. That's what he'd counted on. Sarah became my partner in the investigation, and I saw a side of my daughter I'd never fully appreciated. One evening, she arrived at my condo with her laptop and an expression of cold determination I recognized from looking in the mirror. I hacked David's cloud backup, she announced, not asking permission, just stating fact. Sarah. He tried to kill you, Dad. Privacy laws don't particularly concern me right now. She opened her laptop, showing folders filled with months of deleted emails, call logs, even draft messages David had written but never sent. He thought deleting them from his phone meant they were gone. He forgot about automatic cloud sync. One draft message, dated 3 months before my heart diagnosis, stopped us both. Dad's heart condition is worse than he's admitting, David had written to someone. Rachel, probably. Dr. Kim mentioned last year he had irregular rhythms. When the inevitable happens, I need to be positioned to take over Bennett Development. Patricia agrees he's being stubborn about succession planning. Time to be more proactive about securing our future. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. He was planning this before you even got sick. He wasn't reacting to your diagnosis. He was anticipating it, hoping for it. I stared at my son's words, feeling something inside me die. Not the hope that this was a desperate mistake born of financial pressure. That died when I saw the video. This was the death of something deeper. The belief that David had loved me at all, even imperfectly. He'd been planning my death as a business strategy, a problem to be solved. I wasn't his father. I was an obstacle to his inheritance, and he'd been waiting for nature to remove me. When nature took too long, he decided to help it along. I'm sorry, Dad, Sarah said, closing the laptop. Don't be. You just gave me evidence that proves premeditation. That's the difference between manslaughter and attempted murder. You might have just added 10 years to his sentence. The private investigator tracked David's movements and photographed meetings with a corrupt financial advisor named Eric Chen. The investigator captured one meeting at a Starbucks in Bellevue on a Wednesday afternoon. The video had no audio, but body language told the story. David, agitated and pale, sliding documents across the table with shaking hands. Eric, smooth and confident in an expensive suit, reviewing papers with a gold pen. Part 3, complete, 900 words. Ready for Part 4? Please confirm to continue. Q. Okay, the Price of Blood, Part 4-5. Through legal discovery, we obtained encrypted emails between them that Eric had carelessly stored in a personal cloud account. Once the old man signs the updated POA or dies, we move everything to the Cayman accounts within 48 hours, Eric wrote in one email dated 4 months ago. The offshore structure I've set up is bulletproof. 3-layer LLC protection, nominee directors, the works. His estate attorney won't even know to look for these transfers for months. By the time anyone notices, the money's gone and untraceable. "What's your cut?" David replied. 20% of what we successfully move. Fair deal for both of us. I take the risk of setting up the structure. You handle the logistics on your end. Eric wasn't just an advisor. He was the architect of the theft, the professional who made David's murderous fantasy seem executable. But the most damning evidence came from Patricia. Sarah managed to photograph a second phone Patricia kept hidden in the guest house, a burner she used for calls she didn't want documented in the divorce. Robert's investigator legally obtained the call records through a subpoena. The recordings were devastating. Patricia and David had been in regular contact. She knew about the poisoning. She knew about the timeline, and she'd made a calculated decision. If Michael dies before the divorce finalizes, Patricia told David in one recorded call, "I inherit under the old will. That's worth more than fighting for 50% in divorce court. You get your share as beneficiary, I get mine as widow. We both win." "What if he finds out?" David asked. "He won't. He trusts you, and even if he suspects something, he's getting weaker every day. By the time anyone questions anything, it'll be too late." Listening to my wife of 22 years discuss my death like a business transaction was somehow worse than discovering my son was poisoning me. At least David was desperate and damaged. Patricia was simply cold. Phase 2. The setup. This was the part that required performance. After Dr. Walsh identified the digoxin poisoning, she immediately switched me to the correct medications and started chelation therapy to clear the toxin from my system. But for phase 2 of the plan to work, I had to convince David the poisoning was still effective. So I acted the part. I stumbled when I walked. I forgot conversations. I let my hands shake when I held a coffee cup. I stopped shaving every day. I lost weight deliberately, skipping meals and letting my clothes hang loose. But I wasn't dying anymore. I was performing death while growing stronger by the day, waiting for David to make his final mistake. David started visiting more frequently, his mask of concern growing thinner as he thought victory was approaching. "How are you feeling today, Dad?" he'd ask, and I could hear the anticipation underneath. "Tired, son, so tired." I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. Then I set the trap. During a family dinner, I mentioned casually that I was planning to update my will. "Dr. Kim suggested I get my affairs in order," I said, pushing food around my plate. "I'm meeting with Robert next week to make some changes." I saw David and Patricia exchange a glance. Rachel's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Changes?" David asked carefully. "Just clarifying some things, making sure everything's properly structured with the divorce pending, designating who manages the business if I can't, updating beneficiaries, standard stuff." I paused for effect. Robert said we should wrap it up within 10 days. After dinner, David made a mistake. He thought I was asleep in my chair when he stepped into the backyard to make a call. The cameras caught everything. "He's changing the will in 10 days, David hissed into his phone. "We need to move faster." Eric Chen's voice. "How much faster?" "I'm going to increase the dose, double it. We can't risk him cutting me out." "That's dangerous. If someone tests, nobody's going to test anything. He's dying of heart disease. It's expected." Phase 3. The sting. I'd been coordinating with Detective Ryan Foster from the Seattle Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. He'd been building the criminal case while Robert built the civil one. The morning of David's final medication switch, I didn't go to my supposed doctor's appointment. Instead, I went to the police station and waited. Patricia left for her Pilates class. Sarah texted me, "House is empty." David arrived at 2:30 p.m., using his key. The cameras tracked him walking straight to the kitchen, pulling out a new plastic bag, opening my medication organizer. This time, as his hand reached for the pills, Detective Foster, and 2 officers walked through the front door. "David Bennett, you're under arrest for attempted murder, wire fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent." The color drained from his face. "What? What is this?" They found the burner phone in his car, found the forged documents in his home office, found emails with Eric Chen detailing exactly how they planned to drain my accounts while making my death look natural. David was denied bail. Attempted murder combined with sophisticated financial crimes made him a flight risk, especially with $385,000 already offshore. He spent the entire 8 months before trial in King County Jail. When Patricia returned from Pilates, 2 FBI agents were waiting. While she couldn't be charged with attempted murder, prosecutors explored charges of misprision of felony, knowing about a crime and failing to report it. But proving she knew David intended to kill me rather than just incapacitate me required evidence of explicit knowledge. The recorded calls destroyed her in civil court. The court cases took 8 months. Sarah held my hand through every day of testimony. The divorce trial ran parallel to David's criminal trial, and both were brutal. David's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity due to gambling addiction. Tried to claim he never intended to kill me, only to make me sick enough to sign over power of attorney. Tried to paint me as a cold father who'd abandoned him financially. The prosecution demolished him. They presented Dr. Walsh's testimony about the digoxin poisoning. They showed the security footage of David tampering with medication multiple times. They traced the stolen $385,000. They played recordings of his phone conversations where he explicitly discussed my timeline for death and his plan to increase the dosage. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced David to 15 years in federal prison. Wire fraud across state lines, attempted murder, money laundering, all stacked. With good behavior, he might get out in 12. I remember the moment the sentence was read. David turned to look at me, and for just a second, I saw not the calculating man who'd been killing me, but the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike at Green Lake. I remembered the day he graduated from Stanford Business School. Patricia and I flew down for the ceremony. David was 24, wearing his crimson robes, full of promise. After the ceremony, we had dinner at a restaurant in Palo Alto. He ordered expensive wine and raised his glass. "I'm going to make you proud, Dad," he'd said, gripping my hand across the table. "I'm going to build something as significant as Bennett Development, maybe even bigger." "You already make me proud," I told him. And I meant it. Somewhere between that proud Stanford graduate and the man switching pills in my kitchen, something broke inside him. Or maybe it was always broken, and I just refused to see the cracks. Then his face hardened in the courtroom, and he was led away in handcuffs. Rachel filed for divorce the day after sentencing and got full custody of their 6-year-old daughter, Emma, my granddaughter. Rachel sends photos sometimes, through Sarah. Emma has David's dark curly hair and his smile, but Claire's blue eyes, my first wife's eyes, passed down somehow through David to his daughter. I keep the latest photo in my wallet, tucked behind my driver's license. Emma on a beach somewhere, building a sandcastle, completely absorbed in her work. "Why do you torture yourself, Dad?" Sarah asked when she saw me looking at it. "Because she's innocent," I said. "Emma didn't choose her father. She doesn't deserve to lose her grandfather because her dad tried to murder me. Maybe when she's 18, if she wants answers, she'll find me. Until then, I'll keep her photo and hope she has a better life than her father chose. That's the price of justice, sometimes. You get the verdict you need, but you lose pieces you can't get back." Eric Chen testified against David in exchange for immunity, but lost his financial advisor license and filed for bankruptcy. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Spokane under his mother's maiden name. Patricia's trial was civil, not criminal. Robert played the recorded calls where Patricia discussed waiting for my death to maximize her inheritance. The judge's face was stone. "Mrs. Bennett, I find that you acted in bad faith throughout these divorce proceedings and showed a shocking disregard for your husband's life and safety. Instead of the $8.5 million she'd demanded, Patricia received $3 million and was ordered to pay $150,000 of my legal fees. But more devastating was the destruction of her reputation. By the time the trial ended, everyone knew. She moved to Arizona 6 months later. I saw Patricia one last time before she left. She came to collect the final boxes from the guest house on a gray morning in March. Something made me walk outside. "Michael." She stopped, a box balanced on her hip. Up close, she looked older. The divorce had aged both of us. "I didn't know he was actually going to kill you," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I thought he was just making you sick enough to need help. I thought—" "You thought you'd calculate your advantage either way," I interrupted. "Whether I lived or died, you'd position yourself to maximize your inheritance. That's not ignorance, Patricia. That's calculation." "I was afraid," she said quietly, "of being alone, of being nobody without your money. So you stayed silent while David killed me. You never warned me. You never picked up the phone." She had nothing to say to that. She drove away, and I didn't feel anger anymore, just pity. She'd traded 22 years for $3 million and a reputation she could never repair. I sold Bennett Development Group 9 months later. Final sale price was $22 million. She'd conveniently excluded my premarital holdings and the company's increased valuation when calculating her demands. After taxes and legal fees, I cleared just under $17 million. I set up trust funds for Sarah and bought her a house in Fremont with a yard and good light for her design studio. I'm 59 now, a year older and infinitely wiser. My heart condition is managed with proper medication. I walk every morning along the lake, usually with Sarah, and I think about how close I came to losing everything that truly mattered. Last spring, Sarah introduced me to Linda, a 52-year-old yoga instructor who'd lost her husband to cancer. We started with coffee, moved to dinners. She knows everything about what happened and said, "You survived. That's what matters now." David is an FCIC TAC, eligible for parole in 10 years. I don't know if I'll ever speak to him again. Part of me hopes prison will help him understand what he tried to do. Another part knows that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. Here's what I learned. True wealth isn't measured in properties or bank accounts. It's measured in the people who stand beside you when the world crumbles. My son tried to end my life for money that would have been his eventually. In his desperation, he lost everything. He lost his freedom, his family, his father. Meanwhile, I'm here, breathing, living, loving the people who deserve it. Every morning when I wake up in my condo overlooking the lake, when I have breakfast with Sarah, when I watch the sun rise over the Cascades, I'm grateful. David took my trust and tried to turn it into a death sentence. Instead, he showed me exactly how precious life is and exactly who deserves to share mine. I survived my son trying to kill me. I survived my wife's betrayal. I survived, and I rebuilt. And every single day I'm alive is a day I won.